We're not an event company. We're a procurement company.
You're working with companies the likes of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and they're all booking on your platform today.
We saw in 2025, 90% of conversion to sign a global contract. So we're clearly addressing a pain that is real, and the adoption is massive, more than any feature that we have launched in the past 3 years. Our users are suddenly using way more our AI planner versus traditional search. This craving for AI planner, I'm like, this is the future. For incumbent competitors, AI has been terrible for them because it has just killed the moat. So supply is not a moat. However, you have to scale it fast. The detail that we have about the meeting rooms, about the light, about all the equipment, no typical LLM or generalist LLM would have this. So that's how we were like, okay, there is an opportunity to build a very powerful AI engine.
If you paint a picture of what success looks like for Naboo in the next, 5-10 years, what does that look like for you?
That's a very tough question.
Hey everyone, I'm Antoine Moyroud and this is the Investment Memo, the show where founders reveal the stories behind their businesses and how they will shape the future of their industries. Today, I'm joined by Maxime Eduardo, co-founder and CEO of Naboo, the AI-native procurement platform. I first met Maxime in 2024 when he was raising his Series A, and since then he's gone on to have an exceptional 25, scaled to serve global companies like Google, JP Morgan, Uber, and here we are celebrating the Series B. We'll talk about how this idea took shape, what early growth looked like, and why their approach will define the way enterprises plan events. Maxime, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We've got a series of questions that we can dive into, and they're essentially on the back of this little memo that we've put together, articulating the reasons for which we're pretty excited to be in business with you. But maybe just to kick things off and to introduce Naboo a bit, on the surface, the concept of Naboo, and that's what I experienced myself when I got to know you at the very beginning, Naboo felt very agency-like. It's much different to one would actually think about when thinking about agencies, events. And so when you look at the corporate event space, we refer to Naboo as a Naboo for a B2B events booking platform, and now it's growing into a vision of an AI procurement platform. Can you walk us through, what is Naboo and what do people tend to get wrong about Naboo specifically?
First of all, I'd say that you're not the first person to tell me this. I'm used to having people who say, "Are you a tech company?" Then I invite them to our office and just look at the people around, and then they realize it. I think when we first had a look at this market, we understood quickly that it was highly human intense, which usually is a good ground for disruption. So we were not at all, I would say, repulsed by this, but more attracted to how can we redefine a new software, a new way of serving this industry, right? Because it's highly people oriented, but there's so much repetitive tasks, so much admin work, so much time spent by people which can actually be completely automated, right? So that's what attracted us at the very beginning. And I think also this market would not have been disrupted 10 years ago. A lot of companies tried 10 years ago. And as you can see, there's no one that actually owns the market right now, mostly because it's a service market. And I think thanks to AI, we can now service this market with a software. In a way, doing service as a software. So that's what we do, and that's what attracted us.
And I guess that's what attracted us as well. So I think that, when looking at the business, what wasn't necessarily super intuitive going into that market, I think the fragmentation and the human labor piece was definitely a big component. But I'd say that historically, the challenge that we have when looking at very fast-paced growth companies is that, they may be marketplace-based or they may be SaaS-based, but the accelerant around AI, which we'll touch upon later in the conversation, is something that is really hard to get right. And I feel that you guys understood this really well. When digging, more into the corporate events market as one of the bricks of procurement, one of the things that we realized was this, high frequency, multi-supplier, the emotional pain of having to deal with all the complexity, and the fact that, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of procurement tools, it was something that wasn't really addressed. And so we've seen with companies like Navan, people finding similar success in corporate travel and totally reinventing the industry. In the context of Naboo, when did you realize that massive opportunity? Because the depth of the market is actually pretty phenomenal.
It took time because we started the company addressing mostly SMBs. Because in terms of go-to-market, we kicked off the company with ads, mostly Google ads, attracting SMBs that were basically looking for organizing their events, right? On Google, typing, organizing an event, a seminar, a Christmas party, whatever it is. So we did not realize that for the first year of the business. And then we raised money with Isaïe in November 2023, and they helped us understand that this market is actually about corporates. And when we started to work with corporates, this is where we discovered the whole pain. And a lot of VCs actually used to tell us, what is the pain? And our answer used to be, we need to bring consumer experience in the B2B world, but this is not a pain. This is more of an opportunity. The real pain, we discovered that when we started to dig into corporates and why they would need us. So we understood as we were discussing with them, right? And when we saw this procurement problem, which is about everything you said, the fragmentation of the vendors, the spend, which is completely scattered across the organization, needed to have control, visibility on the spend. All this was new, right? We didn't start the company for this.
And, now we look at where you're at and there's so much more to be done, but, you're working with companies the likes of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, companies like the likes of Meta, and they're all booking on your platform today. You've got this phenomenal flywheel where you start off with a marketplace and then you work towards contracts. Could you maybe touch a bit on this? Because that's a pretty unique flywheel, but I think in the context of businesses is often misunderstood.
Yeah, and this is also something that our salespeople are very happy about.
Yeah.
So we have our acquisition model is through indeed the marketplace, so the booking platform. So we still have PAs, event managers that go to Google or to GPT and just type organizing an event and just land on our platform. But now we know that there is a massive pain behind that. So obviously we help them solve and organize their event and book their events for sure. What we're really doing here is to build a relationship so that this person actually takes us to the one that has the proper pain, which is procurement. So everything we're doing with these PAs and event managers that come to book regularly on the platform, as you said, is to actually go to procurement. That's our go-to-market. That's how we manage to speak to so many procurement leaders in the whole world, not just in the US, but also in the UK, in France, in Germany. It's thanks to this I would say, acquisition funnel. So it's also a good thing in terms of profitability because, clients are using us so that we can sell them. So if you think about it, they're paying us to sell them.
Yeah.
It's quite original because then our cost of acquisition is, could even be negative, right? So.
And that's something that I think is also really, says a lot about the quality of your product because you can talk about it in commercial sense, but the word of mouth that you're seeing from usage is also what drives that reality that people introduce you to procurement leaders and that procurement companies outbound you directly saying, hold up, we've been seeing a bunch of usage on our platform. Tell us more about Naboo.
Yeah, I sent you an email. I forwarded you an email that I received a couple of days ago. That happens a lot. Procurement leaders just inbounding to us saying, how come you represent $1 million of spend? I just discovered that we have this massive supplier account, which is Naboo. What are you doing? And then this is an incredible opportunity to talk to them. And in the end, we saw in 2025, 90% of conversion upon discussion with procurement to sign a global contract. So we're clearly addressing a pain that is real, and they have almost no alternative to what we offer.
Being a bit transparent around our story with Lightspeed and Naboo, that was one of the question marks that we had at the Series A, right? So I think, if we think about some of the key bets that we were looking at the time, I'd say that it was your AI transformation, which we're going to talk about much more, but there was also this belief that you'd switch from a marketplace business to something which was much more enterprise driven and this international expansion. And so maybe if we just use the last point you've mentioned on this enterprise expansion piece, that belief and that high win rate is something that is fairly unique. And, you may not yourself recognize it as much because you're, in the weeds of the business, but the ability to convert at such a high rate is something that we felt was very unique. When conducting references on the business, one procurement director, and I don't think I shared this with you, one procurement director had said that you guys had ranked first unanimously across all of the phases. When you think about, the decisions that are being made in those rooms, what do you think leads to people saying, Naboo checks all the boxes?
I don't exactly know what happens there, but what we do, and we've been doing that for a year now, we have hired a board of procurement leaders that come here at Naboo every 3 months to help us build the future of AI procurement. So I think the good thing about what we've done and what we've built is we've built it with them. We've built everything with our client.
Yep.
There's nothing that we really made up, right? We've worked, we've done, and we're still doing it, workshops, in-depth workshop about the product, about the value prop. Every single feature that's in our product is inspired by discussions that we've had with our procurement leaders working with us, right? And I think this is helping a lot. I'm not saying, I guess a lot of companies do that, right? But probably we're the only one in the corporate event space to have invested that much into understanding the proper pain of our customers and designing a value prop which which answers exactly each and every single pain point they have in their journey. And again, without AI, you cannot do it. So that's also why we don't have that many competitors. And that's also why we have such a high win rate, because you need to invest in the AI capability. Otherwise, you cannot answer the pain point, or you can answer it partially, which probably explains why we were so high on all the criteria, because we invested on all of them.
We talked about this and we just said it in passing as if it was a normal thing. But that 90% win rate, when thinking about those enterprise accounts, I'd like to spend a bit more time on it, especially because you work with enterprise accounts that have very long-lasting relationships with incumbents. And so when you look at those results and you look back on it, beyond the high quality of your team, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, what leads you to believe that you're in this winning position today and that you'll continue to be in that winning position tomorrow?
First of all, the incumbents on which we win against, those are well-known brands like Amex GBT or BCD Travel. Those are great companies. They mix two things. They do both business travel and corporate events. And as business travel is, in terms of like market size, bigger, probably 3x bigger than corporate events, I think they've been investing way more into the business travel. Business travel is more mature than corporate events. And I do think that they are pretty late on servicing corporate events. They haven't done the investment that are required to do it, because business travel is a commodity. Business travel, you can service this by technology. You know Navan, right? So Navan has been transforming this experience into a commoditized software, right? Everybody can now use it. It's completely like, Navan has done the job. And I think incumbents got stuck on this part and have not evolved and invested in the capabilities you need to have in terms of technology, data, and AI to service the corporate event market. So the level of experience that they're delivering to their customers with this is not satisfactory anymore. The expectations of corporates in terms of providing a great booking experience, planning experience, procuring experience, paying experience with respect to corporate event, it has evolved. They're much more demanding. So yes, we are the pure player going at this. Now, the only risk that we could have seen here is, do they accept, and what I mean by they is procurement, to split, have different players on travel and corporate event? And the 90% says yes. And this was the real risk, right? Do they want to have two players? But the category is still big. I mean, corporate event is still big and justifies to have one single vendor for this. So yeah, that's my take here. I think we're, by the way, much cheaper because we're so much more efficient. That obviously
and the
our
savings
prices,
that you talked about as well, right?
And exactly. And we're delivering so much savings and everything is automated, simple. The experience, the NPS, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, all that makes it a no-brainer for corporate to actually switch from the old world to the new world.
And it feels, I mean, we didn't talk too much about this, but all this workflow automation, all this deep understanding that you have around procurement needs, for me, leads to a future where you're also able to address many more topics that go beyond corporate events. And that chaotic wedge that is corporate events feels like a very fertile ground to build, experimentation around AI and generally just some workflows that are totally automating a huge part of what people are doing across procurement today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it actually, like all the fundamentals of corporate event in terms of procurement or procurement pain is actually what we call tail spend category or C-class category. And there are a lot of categories like this one. And the principles that we have applied, the tech bricks that we have put together, that we have implemented, all the integration that we have with corporates about their P2P system, their ERP system, all that actually applies to any other tail spend category. And indeed, I think one of the reasons why Lightspeed also decided to invest alongside us is because the potential is not just corporate event. It's also about all these categories, right? And no one goes at them because they're like individually they're small or relatively small, but when you look at them collectively, then suddenly it's a massive market.
Which is something that the procurement experts and procurement leads inside those large organizations have intimately known for a while. But that external understanding is something that was harder to come by. And so I think it's something that you yourselves have recognized as you were going deeper and deeper into that procurement world.
Yeah, but because our clients, first, they are extremely surprised by the fact that we are procurement experts. We're not an event company. We're a procurement company. Before being an event company, right? And it makes a huge difference. My team of salespeople, they are procurement experts. They are regularly trained to be at the top of procurement, right?
Yep.
So indeed, when we spoke with our clients, they were so happy with the level of software automation, simplicity that we bring to the corporate event category. They've been asking us to do that on other categories. To be honest, we didn't have the idea. They told us to do this. So we're now working on a second category. And yeah, I think the potential is immense here.
And that's something that, you can tie to AI, but also one thing that I've noticed speaking with the folks across the company and hearing also firsthand from customers is how they talk about the understanding that your employees and yourself and the rest of the team have of that customer pain. And it feels that it ripples down, quite across the organization. And so maybe we'll touch on this on the culture piece, but I think it's really unique to be able to not only, do that talk, but walk that talk. And you've done a great job there. One other element that I wanted to touch on this enterprise journey that you've been on the back of the marketplace conversations is this white glove approach. So the approach of essentially being able to serve customers in a way that is very differentiated, that is able to do that hand-holding end to end. Can you maybe comment a bit on this and how you think about that in the context of Naboo in 26?
B2B enterprise, like enterprise customers, they have very high expectations in terms of service, even though they're buying the software. I think it's completely delusional to believe that they will buy a software on which they spend, look, Meta spends 100 million a year, right? Would they spend that to some software where there is no response, where there is no trust building, when there is no client relationship building? I strongly doubt that. So yes, we have been investing a lot on customer relationship and customer service. We do have our own concierge here, a concierge team here. They're serving our clients. And I think if you ask all our clients, they will all say the service is incredible. First, even before saying that the software is incredible. And I care a lot about this because again, in the enterprise world, they need to feel the white glove service. Now, this is only interesting to me if we make that scalable. And sorry, back again to AI. AI makes this scalable because our concierge team scales as our company grows without increasing really the number of people because they can manage so many more at the same time thanks to AI. We keep on having the same, even increase the quality of service while scaling our operations. And this is what's interesting for our clients.
That's maybe leads us to the second piece of our underwrite, certainly. And I would argue the most major piece for myself, given the background that I have on AI and spending a bunch of time with different founders, is that this AI narrative is one that a lot of founders are talking about. Many talk about how they're adding AI across their business and that is driving a bunch of efficiency. I think the reality is that a lot of founders, unfortunately, aren't able to kickstart that AI transition, let alone harvest the dividends from that productivity increase and the dividends in terms of customer delight. Because, we can talk about your NPS, but I think back to your knowledge, your understanding and framing of white glove that scales thanks to AI, it's certainly something that we've seen in the numbers and that we've seen in the feedback we've been getting. So maybe to talk about this in terms of how AI is both a core engine for your growth, but also a outsized value creator for your customers. Let's talk about that transition because some people have referenced you guys as an outsourced procurement team. And it's interesting to think about that capability that you bring without necessarily growing that headcount. And so when we talk about this, you're not just a marketplace, you're not just an enterprise SaaS, you're this notion of service as a software. So what do you think when you hear that?
I love that because this is honestly the way I describe our business. And this is extremely interesting even for VCs because the service markets are bigger than software markets, if you think about it. So AI enabled this pocket becomes accessible to software thanks to AI. So I believe this is true. I think AI is at the core of everything we do here. And as you said, not just to improve efficiency, because of course that's one way of dealing with AI, but also to generate additional value for our customers. And this latter, I underestimated it, to be honest. 2 years ago, when we started our AI journey, back then we were using GPT 3.5 models that seem really outdated now.
It feels far now.
We were not able to deliver increasing customer value, to be honest. It was a bit of a fail 2 years ago, but it was good to experiment and to understand what's feasible with AI. So we were not able to generate value for customers. So at that point, I was a bit more distant to just showing AI to our customers. And by the way, we were not ready. They were not ready at that time as well. So we used AI only internally. So we wouldn't tell anyone, by the way. You wouldn't see any mention of AI on our websites back then. Nobody knew that we were doing AI, but we were actually embedding AI in every single piece of the software to help our teams deliver way more with less. And you could see that in our metrics. I think our metrics speak for themselves in terms of contribution margin, efficiency. So this is what drove our profitability, for sure. But and we'll keep doing this a lot. But what gives me even more faith in the future is now we are bringing new AI features for our customers that actually drive more interest, more revenues, more retention. And I think this is what really matters. Can you differentiate your value prop with AI? It's not just about doing them more profitability. It's about increasing the value. And just giving an example here, we're in the procurement business. What matters for procurement is the savings they generate thanks to our software. They want to buy better. And what we are seeing here is that thanks to our AI, we can be more efficient into launching automated RFPs with our vendors and increasing the value, the savings that we manage to generate thanks to AI. In a way, AI does RFPs better than humans. And that's normal. It's a complex and admin topic, right? It reads the T's and C's of vendors way faster than any human. It identifies any pain point in the T's and C's faster than any human. So it brings more value. And since we unlock this for procurement clients, it's just another world. And suddenly you cannot be compared with any competitor if they don't have AI. So massive, massive business unlocker, I would say.
And it feels that, there's only so much you can do also with AI if you don't have the distribution and the underneath engine around supply as well. And you guys have done a pretty phenomenal job at building that supply over time. We'll touch on it when talking about internationalization a bit more. But your ability to launch geographies from scratch and in a very short amount of time being able to scale is something that I feel is fairly unique. When talking about this transition from AI tooling internally to putting AI into the hands of users, what gave you the confidence that, back to your point around you being surprised at how end users would actually be very happy with AI? What changed? Was there a change in customer habit? AI became a more discussed theme?
Yeah, I think it's not about us. I think it's more about OpenAI for having made it so common, right? To just chat and get answers fast from an AI. I think for me, they were the first one to really make it to make the people aware that it's accessible to anyone, right? Now I have other softwares that I love. Anthropic and Claude, is probably my favorite AI software right now. But I think all this contributed to making people aware that this is for them and that they can actually use them and that they can be actually more efficient, faster, more intelligent. I see so many people, even in my private life, just using AI to be intelligent, right? And I think now people like that and know how to use it. So obviously, when we put that into the hands of our customers, now they use it. 2 years ago, they were like, do I have to chat? Do I have to answer? Is it a human behind? So 2 years, massive change. So I think it's also about time to market, right? And now is the time.
And I remember when we chatted, so now it's, I think at the time it was maybe November 24, so just a bit more than a year. We had this discussion around the different tools that you were going to put into place to support your growth, both internally, but also in terms of product for customers. And one of the things that I think stood out at the time was that vision that you had, which is now a product, and I'd love you to comment on, of Rafale, and the idea of being able to put that power of AI into the hands of end users. Could you speak a bit to that transition around how Rafale as a product came about internally, how you guys got that adoption going internally, and then thinking about the current state, which is exposing it to the end users?
Yeah, this was a journey. So actually, the ancestor of Rafale was called Yoda AI. So as a reference to Yoda, Naboo, Star Wars. It was 2 years ago. That was the one with GPT 3.5, which was a complete failure. But for me, as an entrepreneur, I kept seeing my team, the event managers here, asking themselves, hey, I have this brief. Who had it? Who already had it? What did you propose? What are the best venues for this? But they want something anywhere in Europe, somewhere warm by the sea. What can I offer? And then I'm like, God, AI would do that so much better. And so this is how we decided to work on this AI sourcing engine. And we saw the real power of combining vertical proprietary data with LLMs. Suddenly it becomes crazy. Go on GPT or Gemini and ask for a venue somewhere in Europe. Of course, they will share venues, but the insights that we have, the precision of the data we have, the prices that we have on an opaque market, which is a B2B market where you cannot find any prices on the web, the detail that we have about the meeting rooms, about the light, about all the equipment, no typical LLM or generalist LLM would have this. So that's how we were like, okay, there is an opportunity to build a very powerful AI engine. We first did that for our employees. So they've been using Rafale for like probably 6 months now. We've seen a surge in usage. Suddenly they were not using anymore the traditional search and only using Rafale, probably 90% of their job. We saw a massive increase in productivity. Well, I shared with you the numbers, but in 2 years, plus 140%, which is massive if you think about it.
Which honestly, when I first saw it, I was like, just too good to be true.
But real. And I demonstrated the numbers to you. And,
for sure.
And then actually we had a conversation together and you were like, when are you going to push Rafale for end users? And I was a little scared because I was also, I remember 2 years ago when we did this with your AI, and honestly, that did not do any good to Naboo. So yeah, I was a bit skeptical, and we launched that a few days ago. And the adoption is massive, more than any feature that we have launched in the past 3 years. Our users are suddenly way more, like they're shifting. They're using way more our AI planner, so the Rafale, versus traditional search. But it's massive. It's like suddenly 90% of our users. And we're generating so many leads. I mean, I think we're now accessing users that we were not accessing before. Our enterprise customers, they don't yet have the AI planner because we need to add a few more rules about GDPR, CPRA into our software. And they're like, why don't we have it? They're asking for it. They're like, oh, we can see that people who are not on the white label environment have it. Why don't we have it? So this craving for AI planner, I'm like, this is the future. So we're reshaping all the software engineers teams. Now we have a dedicated squad only on the Rafale just to make it so incredible for our customers. We're going to invest loads on this.
I think it's interesting what you're saying culturally also about how companies have evolved, because if you go back to this ChatGPT moment where a lot of organizations had this horizontal approach, maybe the first piece of embedding AI into companies around giving everyone access to a chatbot, that's just a very horizontal approach. What we're seeing now, and I think you're direct beneficiaries of this, is as organizations have matured in terms of how to use tools in AI, there's this vertical approach of, in my specific remits, whether it's procurement, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance, just this focus on what type of specific tools can enable me to do my best job. And that vertical AI piece combined with the proprietary data is something that we've seen actually across a bunch of different businesses. And I've named a few to you in the past, a Bridge in the healthcare sector and a bunch of others in the law sector. And I think that there's something very similar happening here. And perhaps even more so because of the fragmentation of the space. On the third topic, which is that belief in international expansion. When we looked at the Series A, at the time you were getting started in the UK, and now in hindsight, it's not even a topic anymore, right? Like you've grown like crazy in the UK and you're growing even faster in the US. I think it would be good to get a sense of what you found to be the biggest challenge with scaling internationally.
Look, I think we were as unprepared as you can imagine. We just did it. Right? We started with the UK. Everybody was telling us, not the UK. It's going to be harder. There's a different currency. Our original currency was euro, right? A lot of people told us, go to Germany, go to Spain, but don't go to the UK. And we, for some reasons, decided to go to the UK. And suddenly, it picked up super fast, faster than France. And we're like, what's happening? And for the first 6 months, we were just growing and not seeing any problem. But then suddenly, you realize that you're managing bookings in a different currency, that you're not hedging this currency, that you need to be compliant with all the regulation, local regulation. We're a travel agent, right? So we need to be compliant with everything. And then increasing complexity in terms of invoicing, payments. This, honestly, we would not know about this. And to be honest, it's good that we didn't know about that, because otherwise we would probably have not done it. But then every single time we have opened a country, so we've opened since then Spain, Germany, the Benelux, the US, Canada. It has become more and more, I would say, easy for us as we would learn from the past experience. But to that end, the UK has been an incredible experience. As you said, the slope of growth was, and it's still incredible. So we've learned a lot. And yes, in the US, we're growing even faster and we're having less troubles with the admin difficulty.
And I'm sure that, as you've matured your thinking around the procurement platform, a lot of that compliance and auditing elements are things that you, in a way, have lived firsthand yourself as a startup expanding into those countries.
And we're selling this. And I would always remember our head of finance during an XCOM meeting when she told us, guys, I feel like we're a payment and document company. And then,
Sure,
and then
say no
suddenly
more.
we're all, that's actually true. We're like, invoicing is actually part of our value. Managing payment is part of our value. So we need to be extremely good at this, including for us.
And when talking about that growth, I'll take the example of the US because it's more fresh, and you've already been able to have some really good results signing some enterprise customers in a very short amount of time. Can you maybe walk us through how that marketplace component that you've built has supported that international growth as well?
We have decided at the very beginning of Naboo that we would build in public and that we would have no shame in showing our platform environment, our marketplace environment, which is not what most of our competitors do, to be honest. And I think it was even more helpful than we would even imagine. Indeed, to scale the international expansion, to me, I think it's way harder to go and hunt local enterprise customers and start with them than scale what we've done in France at the very beginning, which is open ads on Google and serve SMB customers in the local market. So we've done it again. We've done it in the UK, we've done it in Germany, we've done it in Spain, we've done it in the US. We always start with SMB customers through our initial marketplace. So we put ads on Google, we track them through the keywords, and then this is how we attract SMBs. We build what we call the supply-demand liquidity on the platform, which is we make sure that every single time we do have a request on the platform, there are the vendors to answer this type of brief.
To match that request.
Exactly. And so this is way easier in the UK than in the US because obviously, there's a matter of size, and matter of size of the supply. And also in the UK, one brief out of two is for out of the UK. So we would already have the supply, especially in Europe, right? So it was way easier in the UK. But in the US, we were helped by AI. When you go after the UK, you can find non-AI solutions because it's not that big, right? So you can, have a few junior people and go after the supply. When you go after the US, it's just impossible for two reasons. One, it's big, massive, so many suppliers, 10 times more than in France or in the UK. And second, companies in the US travel a lot. They travel to Mexico, they travel to Costa Rica, they travel to, any destination in the world. So suddenly it's not a few thousand suppliers that you need. It's tens of thousands. And so you cannot deal with that with a normal approach or even a tech approach. So that's how we had to again, rely on AI. And actually we quickly realized that, combining with Rafale, instantly sourcing on any sources available on the web, to be honest, also on our competitors, we were just scraping everything we could, and we're still doing this. And then enriching the data as we move on, right? So I would say it's an iterative process, but we're building the supply thanks to AI. And I also think that for incumbent competitors, AI has been terrible for them. Because it has just killed the moat. It has dismantled it completely. The moat that they have, which was about having the vendors and the suppliers as partners, then we all have them. Ask GPT about having vendors in Thailand. It will find them, right? So supply is not a moat. However, you have to scale it fast now. So, that's the paradox about it.
And I feel that also something we didn't really touch on until now, but the breadth of what your platform is able to serve, from company offsites to strategic meetings to just much broader events, is something that also is a challenge in terms of building up that supply, because you just have such an insane depth of options to go after as well.
No, absolutely. And you need to combine that with the curation that our customers want to have. They don't want to go on Google Maps. They want a platform that has done the curation and that has done also the compliance checks on all the vendors, right? So you need to combine all this, the fact that indeed we're serving business lunch for 5 people up to crazy conferences for 3,000 people.
Exactly.
So it's wide and you need to curate it. So it's not a piece that has to be undermined at all. But again, we've found data and AI tools and ways of doing it that makes it scalable and, to be honest, quite efficient.
Now, I'd like to switch over to the culture piece at Naboo, because that's something that, we talk about AI and it can be a very abstract notion. But one of the things that I think you've been thinking very, very intensely about, and the rest of your co-founding team as well, is how do we make sure that AI is something that everyone internally is also able to think about very intensely? We talked about this at the beginning of the year, but maybe you could comment a bit on how you're thinking about this across your teams.
It's probably the biggest advice I would give to any entrepreneur anyway, is how do you transform now, not tomorrow, now your organization into an AI organization? We could all have different definitions about this. So obviously we have a a software engineer team with a lot of AI people. That's part of it because we're building the software. But that's also about all the other people, HR, finance, marketing, sales. Everybody's concerned about AI, and AI should be absolutely everywhere. So what we're doing now, it's AI adoption amongst our teams is part of our career path framework. So it's 10% of your assessment. So you're assessed twice at Naboo to grow in your career, and 10% of your grade depends on how you use AI, how much you use the software that we give to you, but how much you build software for yourself, how AI equipped you are, because we have a strong belief that any employee is actually twice as efficient if they're using AI intelligently, right? And we're serving them. We just appointed one of our AI engineer, head of AI tooling, and his role is actually to make sure that every single person in the organization is well equipped in terms of AI and also always up to date. Because well equipped today doesn't mean the same thing in 3 months.
So
it's just completely different, right? So it's also about this, and then there's the hiring process that has completely changed. Now we ask every single manager when they recruit to make sure to give an AI case to the candidate. If the candidate does not leverage AI to answer their case, out. We want people for whom this is a reflex, for whom this is very
part of their
instinctive.
toolkits.
Yeah, it's part of how they think and how they behave, right? So hiring is the very first step where you can see the people you want to have in your organization.
Yeah. You touched on one thing that I think is very important that a lot of founders have a hard time understanding is this piece of enablement. How do you make sure that you actually have people that are the stewards of AI without making it come across as this is the IT team that is telling you to use this tool, and have people that act as owners? And I remember this conversation we had towards the end of last year where I was like, actually, I don't really care what type of fire people have individually. It could be the fire of the anxiety of AI taking over their jobs. It could be the fire of feeling that they become superheroes in their ability to their jobs. But that individual push to feel like they need to be empowered with tools is something that is just so important. And feel that you guys have been able to show this with the products you've built internally for your organization.
Yes.
But it's also something that, generally speaking, has bigger ripple effects. And maybe to touch on the hiring piece that you mentioned, when we talk about the archetypes of people that you look for, you touched on this a bit with this idea of we want people that are directly have the reflex of using AI.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yes. And I will come back to a point you made just earlier, but I think AI for AI doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
And I think the worst mistake you can do in an organization is just to tell people to use AI, but not generate any value for them.
Yep.
So if you want to boost the adoption, just show value. It's not AI for AI. I hate the buzzword AI for nothing. And so I think it's all about demonstrating the value. Okay, so that's the very first piece. Make it transparent, and then people will ask for AI, which is, you reverse the phenomenon. Now about what we look for in people that we hire. Obviously, there is this AI thing, which is extremely important. And then we make it extremely simple. One sentence, pretty easy, is do what you say and say what you do. This ensures that we are building because people do stuff. And we are sure that there is trust, and it's a high trust environment because everybody communicates about what they're doing, where they're doing, and they're doing what they say what they talk about.
Yeah.
So it may seem very simple what I'm saying, but our culture is really explained by this sentence. Do what you say what you do in the order you want.
You had this this point recently where you were talking about a recent offsite with the Canadian team, and you were talking about the culture, and you mentioned that it reminded you the first months of Naboo. When you look back, what do you feel has changed, and how has the culture evolved?
That's a very tough question. Indeed, I was in Montreal with our Canadian team, and I could feel the energy. I could feel the energy of the beginning where you have your first clients. I mean, they just passed a bit more than $1 million a month when I was there. And I could see this excitement about every single client that, comes, books. I could see the hunger in how they were. I could see, the small team building and the energy shaping the team, and I was seeing that they were all looking at the same direction. And I love that. And that made me think about how can we now, having an office in Montreal, in New York City, in Paris, in Barcelona, in Hamburg, have everyone look in the same direction.
Yeah.
And so it's sorry, because I'm not answering exactly your question, but it really made me understood that part of my job now is to lead the people into looking at the same, ambition and direction. And this is particularly hard when you have so many different cultures in the organization. We have German, we have Dutch people, we have Spanish people, Italian people, French, English, American, Canadian, and so many more. We have 26 nationalities at Naboo. So this is a hard piece.
The reality is that you've got different cultures, different nationalities, but as you're moving the organization towards more and more AI DNA across the board, you're also seeing, at least we're seeing in conversations with different companies, a difference in culture between people who adopt it and who don't. And so you've got those subcultures of, the people that are moving in that right direction and following that excitement, and others that may not adjust as fast. And I think we discussed this as well. I think it's okay to recognize that some people will not, through that enablement process, make the shift, but that, especially on the growth, the growth you're going after, and just the quality of the conversations you're seeing with enterprise customers, you need to be able to deliver on that promise as fast as possible with the highest quality of service.
Yeah.
And as you said, you can probably only do that through an intense use of AI.
That's impossible otherwise.
Maybe just switching over to the fundraising piece, reflecting on the Series B and this partnership that we now have together. What were you looking for in a partner? Why Lightspeed in the end?
First of all, we knew each other from a year before. I really loved our conversations a year before. What I particularly liked about Lightspeed is the clear bias for AI. And that was something that I was really looking for. I still see some companies raising money without any AI component. And to be honest, I have this sense of urgency that we're living such a transformation that I want to be at the forefront of this innovation and of this transformation. And I don't want to be behind.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in the past 3 years where we've had VCs with us, VCs that I value a lot, because they've helped us stay ahead of this innovation, of this transformation. And this is probably the piece that I valued a lot with my co-founders, of course, is to who's going to be the partner that's going to help us stay ahead of this competition, of this race, of this transformation. So Lightspeed was, I told you before this interview, but I love what Anthropic is doing. And I think this is probably to me, the best company that you've invested in. And I love it. And I love Mistral, of course, for being French myself. So yeah, that was first big piece. Obviously, we got along very well. I think we have this shared passion for technology. Yeah. I love the fact that you shared our vision, which, to be honest, is not everybody does, right? Doing service as a software. A lot of VCs are actually not interested into doing this. So I think there was also a point that was extremely important. And my co-founders valued that a lot. We have high convictions on what we have to do on our market, and we wanted to share these convictions.
Thinking about the conversations that we had internally at Lightspeed as well, I think one of the things that, my background, I spend most of my time across more infrastructure, data, ML, AI topics. And, one of the core reasons of excitement for me is really having seen you act on what you said, see the benefits of it, and also seeing the roadmap ahead of what you're thinking about. Maybe using that last point as a segue into this next question, what does this new raise enable you to do? And what are you putting it to work on?
I think it's the first time that I feel like we have the money for our ambition. And you keep telling me that a lot. Maxime, remember that you have the money.
Yeah.
I am so grateful that we can hire the best talents on the market. I am so grateful for this, because every single time we've had a great talent join our company, it has made a change, and a good change.
Yeah.
And so I think this is not to be underestimated. Probably 20 to 30% of my time now is about hiring.
Yep.
And yeah, having both the money and the Lightspeed stamp helps get the best talents in the world. And this is what I want, because if we want to stay ahead in the competition, we need to have the best talents join us. So I think it's first and foremost about this.
Because there will inevitably be some of those future potential joiners that will be listening to this conversation.
Yeah.
If you paint a picture of what success looks like for Naboo in the next, 5-10 years, what does that look like for you?
Look, I do believe that there is room for a new global leader in procurement, thanks to AI. I know no procurement leader embedding AI into their software and into what they're building. I think we have a very creative way of doing it. And I do believe that maintaining or accelerating the growth at which we're going in a two to 3 years will be one of the great procurement companies in the world. So if you want to be part of this, now is the time.
Yeah. I certainly share that diagnostic. So, but great, Maxime. It's been great to have this chat. Thanks so much. And see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Antoine.